Okay, let me get my slide set up. So we'll start with some of the information that we already looked at. We were talking about civics and government, but we'll start with the idea of what is typically on a map as far as the components or parts of a map. And that's all the elements that are going to help you understand that map and the information on that map. So first off, just like with other information we look at, whether it's a graph or a table or other statistics or passages, it's going to have a title, and it should very easily indicate what the map is about. So right here we have historic grasslands in the continental United States, right? So we know what we're looking at. There is the what they call like the data field, and that's just the map itself, the area of the map that's going to have data displayed. Less important there. Other sort of important elements, which we talked about, you're going to have a legend, or sometimes it's called a key, but that gives you an explanation of the data on the map, right? So here, it's listed historic grasslands, and then it's color coded, based on what type of vegetation is found in those areas, right? So that dark green is forest, steppe, and prairies, up to that light brown color, which is steppes and shrubs. And then, it's placed, the whole idea of these types of maps is to place that information visually, so you can visually locate it, where it appears on any place on the earth. Some other important parts that are often found on a map. Sometimes you might see them, on some maps, maybe not. The scale of a map. A lot of times will be represented like a little bar, and that's what we have here, right? So that's telling you the distance that this map represents to scale, right, for the country. So if you took like a ruler and you found out like maybe that's, I don't know, 2 inches or something like that, maybe not quite 2 inches, then you could take a ruler, obviously, put it up on your map and judge distance that way. Sometimes it might just be numbers, like this scale is 1,000 to 1, or whatever it may be. A lot of times those will be for more kind of higher end maps, and like the USGS. Actually, let me see how their scale works here. Like on this one, so it actually has several different scales that are bars, and it also has a scale at the top that is 1 to 250,000, right? So it just depends on the scale of the map. And that's the other thing too. There's different scales when we talk about large size and small size maps, small scale maps, which we'll talk a little bit about as well. But another element that you will often see is a north arrow. Okay, the north arrow is that little pointy spot down here, at the bottom. It's typically, most of the information will often be on the bottom of the map, but that's no guarantee. Sometimes they may have stuff on the, but the title is usually at the top. But a north arrow will show you how the map is oriented, right? What direction is north. I also mentioned most maps that you see, north is going to be up, right? Those maps are oriented, so north is up. I doubt, on your test they're going to throw you a curve where north is pointed down, or have some real crazy, sort of projection. You're going to see maps like this, or you'll see a world map that has all of the countries on it and things like that. So moving forward, something that's not on this map that we want to talk about, and some other components and some other terms that you want to be familiar with, right? So another element that you'll often see on a map is a grid system, okay? And that is going to use, it's imaginary lines that are vertical and horizontal, that help to navigate and position things on a map. So lines of longitude, I mentioned before, run up and down. They run the length of the planet. That's how you can kind of remember longitude versus latitude. Latitudinal lines run across the globe, okay? There is a very specific system that the world has generally agreed upon that we use for those lines, particularly the lines of longitude. So 0 degrees longitude is, you can see it on the map here, right over here, running through Africa and up through maybe a little bit of Spain, France, and through, most importantly, Greenwich, England. And why is that important? Because that's how they determined where 0 degrees longitude was going to be. There was a conference there or nearby, and all these, cartographers and map dudes, and it really had a lot to do with maritime voyage when this occurred. This is before, this was back in the days of exploration and things like that. They determined that's going to be 0 degrees longitude. It's arbitrary. It could have been anywhere in the world, but it just happens to be Greenwich, England. So you draw a line from north to south, and of course we're talking about a globe, so that's curved, and it goes through Greenwich, England, and that's 0 degrees. Everything east of Greenwich, England, you count up for your degrees of longitude. You can see that on the map. So 10 degrees longitude, we're talking about, maybe a little bit through Italy, Germany, parts like that. And west goes negative. A lot of times you'll just hear them, you'll use the word west. So whatever we're at, is that 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, maybe we're right around 80 degrees west longitude. You don't usually say negative 80 degrees west, but, technically, sometimes you might hear that. And it's 180 degrees. And so when you get to 180 degrees, right, from this side and from this side, that's where it meets on the other side of the planet, right? And that's the international date line, where we agree where the day starts every day. And so the latitude is a little less arbitrary because it basically cuts the planet in the middle. 0 degrees latitude is the equator. And so same kind of thing, you count south or north for your degrees of latitude. I think Columbus is 40 something degrees latitude, right? I've mentioned latitude a couple times when we talk about like the 17th parallel that split North and South Vietnam. And I think it's the 38th parallel that splits North Korea and South Korea. So another fun fact about that separation, the majority of Earth's land mass is in the Northern Hemisphere. It's above 0 degrees latitude, right? It's above the equator. The least amount is below that. So the majority of people on the planet live above the equator. And it goes to up to 90 degrees. So the North Pole, as it shows here, is 90 degrees. The South Pole is 90 degrees. You're probably not going to have too many questions. So they might ask you a very simple question about, longitude or latitude. They'll show you a map with a little bit of a grid on it. But, don't worry about knowing that Greenwich, England is 0 degrees latitude. I just want to point that out as far as how we, determine, navigation and things like how it all works. And of course, that's really important because that's how we navigate the world. And I think I mentioned Mercator, right? So you see those lines on the map and how they're curved right now because they're going around a globe. The Mercator projection makes all of those right angles, and it makes it a lot easier to navigate, which is one of those things that help the Western early explorers from England and France and Spain and Portugal helped them navigate the open ocean because they could always count on their navigation having right angles. The one issue with that is that when you make a map with all right angles, is that you distort the way the land masses look. So Africa winds up being a lot smaller, where Greenland looks almost as big as Africa on a map. And you'll notice that. Like here, you can see Greenland way up here towards the North Pole, and you can see it looks a lot smaller, which is what it is, right? But when we put that on a map, a lot of times it looks a lot bigger because of the way we project it. Okay, moving on. So we want to talk about some of the types of maps, and you may encounter some of these on your test. First off, real simple, a physical map. And just like it sounds, it displays the physical terrain of whatever landmass it is. Just, you know, I picked the United States for all of these maps, just so, you know, we have sort of a basis, you know, something similar to look at each time. And of course, again, you can have different scales. You can have really super large scale maps that might show like a county or even a city or something like that. But a physical map shows physical features of the Earth. And so that's what we have here, right? We see the larger bodies of water. You can see some of the rivers, which always are in blue, right? And then some terrain, so elevation. And our little legend over here in the corner, and it's a little hard to see, but it shows land elevation, right? And that's shaded from green, which is basically at sea level or close to sea level, up to a dark brown, which is, it looks like 4,000 to 11,000 feet. Okay, so you can see the change in terrain over the map, right? So you can see the Rocky Mountains are the highest mountains in the United States, that mountain range. So you can see that those are a lot higher than our little Appalachian Mountains over here. The Appalachian Mountains are a lot older than the Rocky Mountains. But anyway, so you can see, you know, a lot of green there. So it's a lower elevation. The darker brown means a higher elevation. And then you also have, you know, your bodies of water represented there. And there's also inset maps. So particularly when we're talking about the United States, we have the contiguous United States, the continental United States, which are the 48 states, but then we have Alaska and Hawaii. So a lot of times if you have a map of the United States, you'll have a little inset map that'll show you Alaska, which is up, you know, on the side of Canada hanging out, and Hawaii, which is out in the Pacific. So to include those, they put a little map in the corner there, and that's called an inset map. They'll also sometimes use an inset map to sort of blow up a location. So they'll have something, you know, maybe they want to give you a little more detail of California or something like that. Then they'll blow that up into an inset map. But again, physical maps mean physical features found on the Earth. Okay, and just like my USGS maps down here, this is a topographic map. And what it's related to a physical map, but the way they display elevation is different. So what we have here, first off, you see that grid, you see lines of longitude and latitude, and then you have contour lines. So all those little circles everywhere, or not really circles, but you know, they generally, you know, make a circumference around something. Show elevation, right? And so each little contour line represents a change of elevation. And on, like, depending on the scale, like some of my maps, this might be like 40 feet in between each contour line, right? So one contour line, and then the next one up, so you change elevation from, you know, here to 40 feet above that. So by doing that, you can kind of see, you know, where mountain ranges are. So we have I think it's Mount Marcy or Mount Mercy right here. You can see how those contour lines are showing you elevation as you get to the peak of the mountain. The other thing that contour lines help show you, so the closer they are together, right, is showing you that that is a lot steeper of an incline than the other side, right? So like over here, Little Marcy, right, we can see that that slope is a lot more gentle than say on the other side here, which is more like almost a cliff. So that's what topographic maps show. And topographic maps, the USGS, United States Geological Survey, is responsible for all the surveying and all the physical and topographic maps for, even like census data, but it's like just a library of data and information, and you can get maps from them that are very much like this. You might get a question that has like a topographic map. They're not going to make you do something complex like, measure the rate of slope from Mount Marcy down to, whatever this valley is or something like that. But you'd certainly want to know what type of map this is. So showing topography, showing the change in elevation through contour lines. And so one that we're really familiar with by this time, because we use them a lot, is a political map. And a political map just simply shows you borders of a country or states, and typically will have the names. This one has the names and the capitals. So if we are able to zoom in, we could see there's little star there in the middle of Ohio showing us Columbus. So, a lot of maps may incorporate a political map. So, just depending on what the information is. Road maps I've mentioned before, showing our roads and everything will often have like city lines on them or county lines or state lines. And it just helps you to reference the material. So, but a straight political map is just basically showing you the location of states and countries. So, if you go into a school, if they have a map hanging on the wall, I had one in my office at OU. It was just a political map that shows you, the countries all across the world. And again, it might also be a little bit of a physical map. They might actually show you some changes in elevation and stuff like that. But that is the purpose of a political map, is to show you those countries or states. And another common one is a climate map or a meteorological map or a weather map. And, very specific data towards, climate, weather changes, weather phenomena, things like this. So here, this one is from May 1st, 2009. So it was showing you the temperatures and pressure systems of 2009. I doubt they'll throw you something at, like low pressure systems, but you might see something about temperature, right? That's fair game for a social studies question. And we see our scale over here. That would be kind of part of our legend, where the upper part of that is showing you the hottest locations. So over 100 degrees, like 95, right? We have increments of 5 degrees. And showing you down here in Mexico and parts of Texas where it was the hottest in North America that day. So and that, but that could be a question you get. What state was had the highest temperature on May 1st, and they might give you like 4 examples. Texas, Michigan, Idaho, or Maine. So you'd say Texas based on the information you're given here. Other types of weather maps might show like rainfall, but that could also be considered a thematic map or a specialty map, which is what we're going to look at next. And certainly, this is the type of thing, in particular, a map like this or a map similar to this is one that you could very likely see on a social studies test. So thematic maps just display some type of geographic based information, whatever it may be. And, you can imagine you can have a whole slew of different information there. So, migration patterns of birds, or again, rainfall over a course of time, the rainfall for the month of, July to 2022. And this one, a population map, or a population density map, would certainly be something that you could see on your social studies test. So what we have in our legend there, right, is a color-coded system to show you the population per square mile across the United States. So that dark green area, or that dark green shade, is showing you less than one person per square mile in the United States. And I'll pick on Wyoming again, because we've been talking about Wyoming a lot. You can see there's a lot of dark green where Wyoming, there's less than one person living in a lot of these areas. And that's all kind of averaged, right? Certainly there might be, a case where you have two people that are, living in a trailer in the middle of nowhere. But there's nobody else for several square miles around them. So it's an average. Obviously in some of these places like Nevada, where you have a lot of desert, right? You have a low population there. And then we see, where do people live in the United States, which is a type of question that you might get on the social studies test. We could say, on the eastern side of the U.S. So that dark, the reddish shade there, unless there's one under my bar, I think it's 2,500 to 5,000 people. Oh, that's not what I want to do. Can I might not be able to see that if there's one under there. I think there might be another darker red one, but I have a bar that's running across my screen at the bottom and I can't see it. But you kind of get the idea, right? So you think about population centers. You could look at Ohio, right, where you see those darker red collars. Where do you think that is? Any guesses?
Columbus.
Yeah, Franklin County, right? It's Columbus. And then you look up, towards the north there, that's going to be like the Cleveland area. Obviously, you get around the eastern seaboard, right? Here, you're getting around New York City and the populated area there. Same thing, right? California, which has the most population of any state, but look where everybody lives. Right, they're all along the coast there, particularly in the Los Angeles area, down towards San Diego, all in that coastal community. But over on this side of California, that's all desert next to Nevada. It's arguable whether or not LA is livable because of the drought conditions most of the time. But you could see, population centers, and you can make a pretty educated guess just based on what you see there, what that city is or what that population center is. Like here in Colorado, that's Denver. That's obviously Denver. Up here, this is going to be the Seattle area. This is probably the Portland area. So, but, you would get questions, sort of like that. A lot of the questions that you're going to see on the social studies test are going to make you draw conclusions or draw inferences about information that you're getting on a map. So like I said, it could be like, are there just more people live on the east side of the United States, or on the east seaboard of the United States, or in the northern United States, like North Dakota or something like that, right? So it would be something like that where you would look at a map and you'd be like, okay, I could see where, on the eastern side of the United States, there's a lot more people generally than there is on the western side. So that would be the type of information that you would use. Let's see what else I have. Okay, so we're going to look at timelines here real quick, and then I have a few questions to show you that you might see on a social studies test about maps. I having difficulty finding a good timeline that just sort of had a theme, right? So this is just sort of general American history. I was hoping to find one that would have more of like, events leading to World War II or the Civil War. The reason I picked this one is because this is very typical of what you would see as a timeline. Okay, so in this case, you have sort of two timelines. You have the events in the United States history, and then world events on the bottom. Sometimes you might just have one, right? It might not be separated into, events for different geographic areas, but you will see events on either side of the timeline because you got to sort of separate them a little bit so you have room to explain what's there, right? And so this is very typical of a timeline. You'll have, a date, probably just years, because the events are going to be separated most likely by years. If it's something a little more larger scale, it might be, break it down into months or something like that, or they might have, actual days. But the idea represented here is basically what you would see on a timeline. So you're going to have an event that happened at a particular year or month and day. And then just, increasing from left to right, through the years. This one goes up to 1920. Various key events in history, right? So here it mentions the Homestead Act. I mentioned that just briefly, but the Homestead Act, opened up a lot of the Western United States, where basically if you, maintain a residence and work the land or whatever for so much time, you were given a parcel of land from the U.S. government. And that was going on up until, I think, the 1980s. Like, you could still use the Homestead Act to get land in Alaska. And I think there's actually still other programs to get you, to move to Alaska. But anyhow, right, so then we jump ahead to the election of Rutherford B. Hayes. Wins disputed election, becomes president. 1882, Thomas Edison installs the first electric lights in New York City. And you could, very, very self-explanatory, right? We have other events here. 1892, Immigration Center opens in Ellis Island. 1896, the Plessy versus Ferguson case that we discussed, and also the United States defeats Spain in the Spanish-American War in 1898. And of course, underneath that are different world events, like the opening of the Suez Canal, or the Olympic Games in 1896, Mexican Revolution in 1910. And the questions you're going to be asked, the thing, you just have to be very detail oriented when you look at a timeline, based on the questions you might get asked. So that's why I wanted something that might be a little more about one particular event. Is you get a question maybe like, what event preceded the assassination of President William McKinley in the United States, right? So that would be the 1898 U.S. defeat of Spain in the Spanish-American War. Typically, though, they'll be more related, right? So it might be broken into, like, what event led to Theodore Roosevelt becoming president? And it would be the assassination of William McKinley in 1901, something like that. Or, here's a good one, what event preceded the breakout of World War I? And you would look right up above that, and it would be the election of Woodrow Wilson in 1912. And that would be a really particular one. Or, what preceded the United States entering World War I would be the election of President Woodrow Wilson. So it's typically very simple sort of questions about, a cause and effect relationship that you're going to see on timelines, right? So, again, there's not a whole lot to say about them. The only thing that you have to be careful with is the detail. It's particularly, like, you have events going on at the top, and you have events going on at the bottom. So if they ask you a question, you'd have to make sure that you're getting like the immediate event before that. and not one that, might be on the same side of the timeline, something like that. But that's basically timelines, and, along with maps and the other types of graphic information, graphical visual data that we've seen, graphs and tables, right? Other types of statistics would all potentially appear on your social studies test. So let me pop over here. Okay, let's try this. And I am going to put this up on Google Classroom. I know there's been some questions about study guides and things and materials to help prepare you. So this is a whole sort of study guide for the the social studies portion of the test. And basically what you're going to encounter, and this is again what we're going to work with all next week, are just basically running through some practice tests here to get you an idea of what types of questions you're going to see on the test, what type, how they kind of go about presenting the information. And what you tend to have, are kind of like short passages like this, where they give you some information, some historical information or information about the world or government, and then, give you a brief question, which of the following statements is true based on the above paragraph. And I'm going to put this up because it actually will give you an explanation. It gives you the answers somewhere below it, right? And it gives you a further explanation here. But in particular, what I wanted to show you, right? How's the presidential veto work? I think we talked about that. Charts and graphs. So this is going to give you some help here, and there's some questions intermittently about different types of whether it's historical events or statistical information. Like here's a table, but okay, so here's a map, right? And the title was Partial Map of Africa in 1911. So, right, we have Congo there, parts of looks like South Africa, East Africa, and we have some colonial powers sort of printed over those lands. So, right, we kind of take in that map, and then we can look at the question here, what they're going to ask us. So based on this map, right, simple question. Is this coming up for you guys? Can you all see the map okay?
No, I just see Matt Johnson has started sharing screen.
Oh,
screen sharing.
Well, let me stop and try to reshare, see if there's any problem there. Was everybody else able to see it okay?
Yeah.
Yeah? What about now, Debbie? Can you see it?
Nope.
I don't know what would be causing that. You might want to try to bounce out of the exit the Zoom, and I'll let you right back in. That could be part of the issue.
Okay.
Okay. Give that a try. While we're waiting for Debbie, just the map here, right? Real basic. It's a political map, right? And it also has the again sort of traditional names of those locations, that has these colonial.
Yeah. Now I see.
Okay, good. All right, so so we were just getting ready to move over to the question here, but so you can see the map, right? It's just a very partial part of the African continent, and we have these names of these European empires, these colonial empires, over top of some of those locations. So the type of question you might get related to that, right? based on this map, right? And then it's going to have you select, one of these choices. The locations of mountains in Africa has changed significantly since 1911, or West Africa is actually in the east, East Africa is actually in the west, Portugal was one of the few nations with no relationship to Africa, or Europe had a large influence over Africa in 1911. So our answer, right, sort of based on that data, making an inference about what we're seeing and drawing a conclusion, Europe had a large influence over Africa in 1911, right? That's the idea of the question there, or the idea that's represented, because we see all those colonial powers have sort of carved up Africa, right, into colonies and for their own, purposes. So, we can draw a conclusion there that that is what's represented on the map. Obviously, we can't see that the location of mountains have changed in Africa, and that wouldn't make sense anyway. West Africa is West Africa, right? It's over on this side. East Africa is over on this side, so that's all correct. And Portugal, Portugal, right? The Portuguese did have parts of West Africa there under their control, and which I've talked about, right? Portugal is one of the first colonial powers, was the first ones to really head out from the West and start setting up colonies and tapping resources and trading. So, right, so that's kind of the type of question. There's another map down here we'll take a look at. It's a little larger scale. California cities, right? So first off, we look at the name of the map. California cities. We got our California state border there, along with Nevada and Oregon up here. But we also see a bunch of cities, right? And as I mentioned, usually with the like major cities, they'll be represented in sort of like a different, in like a darker color, or usually like a larger circle or a star or something like that. And that's the kind of the case here. Sacramento is actually the capital of California. It's not really represented any differently than San Francisco or Los Angeles. But you can kind of see, the way they have it represented, those dots are sort of larger for the larger cities and smaller for the less, the smaller cities. But, just kind of taking that map in, right, we see a bunch of cities here. Santa Cruz, Monterey, San Francisco, Oakland, Berkeley, Sacramento, Eureka, way up there on the northern part of California, Long Beach, San Diego, LA, Santa Barbara. So then taking a look, what are we talking about here? What kind of question were we going to get? So the next question we're getting asked here, based on this map, cities tend to be located in deserts. Cities tend to be located in mountains. Cities tend to be located near water. Cities tend to be located near national parks, or cities tend to be located in the center of states. So
They tend to be located in water, right? Near water.
Very good. Yeah, exactly. Right. For obvious reasons, right? Particularly in California, because a lot of it's desert. And the other reason is that you have a lot of large cities that have built up next to some ports, right? So San Francisco, Los Angeles have very large ports. They're big port cities where a lot of trade comes through, but also tourism and things like that. But right, we can tell, right? Look at all the names along that coast. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. You put Oakland and San Jose in there as well, and Berkeley and Eureka, right? They're all next to the water. Sacramento's next to a river. So yeah, they're usually next to bodies of water. And traditionally, that's how cities were set up, right? Because that's where you got access. That's where you were able to, either institute trade or move goods. And just access to water as well. Not so much maybe salt water, not the sea, but particularly in the other parts of the United States, around Ohio, you look, your major cities are on a river or two rivers, or, on Lake Michigan, not Lake Michigan, Lake Erie. So you see, right? That's the type of questions you're going to get on the test, sort of drawing conclusions about the information that's displayed there. They're not, again, they're not going to be a lot of, they might have you judge distance on a map, something like that. But typically your questions are going to be probably population related. You'll have like a population density map. You might have something about voting. So you will likely see something about either electoral votes. So you could see a map related to the Electoral College or congressional districts or something like that. But that's, it's pretty straightforward. And as I mentioned, the one thing you just really have to look out for is having an eye for detail, both with timelines and with maps. So, and again, it is a good thing to know your states and learn your states, because they'll ask you, and I can't guarantee that they'll actually have the names of the states on the map. They might have like the initials or something like that, like the postal code, like, for Ohio, they might have OH, but sometimes that might get confusing as well. So that's the other thing you can do to help yourself, is just making sure that you know the states, because you will certainly, if there is a map, and there might probably be several, you could guarantee that at least one of those is going to be on, something related to the United States. There also may be something world related. You might have a world map. I wouldn't be surprised if you would see something either about the age of exploration, which we talked about, like the early colonies that were set up, the early settlements, the movement of European explorers into the Atlantic Ocean and around the Horn of Africa into India, or possibly something like about the Atlantic slave trade, like the Triangle of Trade, or the movement of people across the Atlantic that way. But that's typically the types of stuff you would see map wise. And again, so Monday, starting Monday and through the rest of the week, we will just tackle some practice questions and tests. So stuff that is closely as related as possible to the exam itself. So any questions on maps or timelines? All righty. And, hopefully we'll see some more examples of that next week. And it'll probably start making a little more sense to you, when you get a little practice and you could see exactly the way the test will look. All right. So let's go ahead and take a little break here. And it's probably going to be not a very long language arts lesson today. Today we're going to do determining word meanings. So it's continuing on with, we're sort of going to be like combining all the lessons we've done on context clues and affixes and root words to identify definitions of words. So let's go ahead. We'll go ahead and break till 20 after, give you a little short of 15 minutes. I know you guys had a long session with Rachel, so you can take a breather. And then we'll finish out the week with language arts at 1:20. All right.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye.